right. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Charlie Looker. Charlie Looker is a guitarist and composer and songwriter who you might know from Extra Life, early on maybe Z's, more recently Psalm Zero and Nothing Human. Charlie's also, I'd say, interested in sort of the intellectual sphere, more so than most musicians. So I wanted to sort of geek out on some theory with him and just shoot the shit. So welcome to the podcast, Charlie.
Welcome, John. Thanks for having me. Yeah. Here, I'm going to move
My
this
pleasure.
down so you can like sort of get a little more face here.
Yeah.
Word. All right. Yeah, cool. Man.
So I basically been starting off the podcast asking everybody to just give me a rundown of their coffee habits, because as you know, I'm a coffee guy, and so it really helps me round out my model. So what's your coffee life like?
My coffee life is generally I have a like an at-home espresso machine, like an old school Pavoni, like the pull down one, like one shot at a time. That I inherited from my parents. It's fucking awesome, man. It's like, you know, you got to do the whole thing with grinding and the tamping it down, like each hockey puck. So yeah, I'll do like 2 of those in the morning, like early, and then like, I mean, depending on what I have going on in the day. I mean, now I've got nothing but time. I'm either like writing music here or just reading. So we're doing these live streams and shit like that. But yeah, I was like, 2 in the morning, then maybe like another one around like 2. And then we'll see. I might, if I'm doing like a night session of work, you know, like doing some weird like after dinner late thing, then I'll do like 1 or 2 shots after that.
Nice. And you just drink them as espressos or with some water or some milk or anything?
No, just espresso, man. It's dude, the crema situation on these pulls is just fire, dude. It's like it's like just iridescent oil, like just like the alchemists, you know, just the spreading of the elements, dude, the torment of the bean. It's so sick.
Beautiful. Are you into like sort of darker roasts or lighter roasts, or what type of coffee are you using?
Darker for sure, man. I use the Lavazza, what is it, Rosa, something Rosa. I'm not like I'm not a coffee dude on the level of knowing all the names of like all the shit that's going on now, but I like that. I like that way, like more chocolatey, like really chocolatey, nutty kind of stuff. And I think, I don't know, it's like, it seems like the hip thing with like, with like hip, like coffee places, it's always like way brighter, like this very like lemony, tangy kind of bright vibe. I know people love that. It's kind of like it's not really my shit, man, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely not for a lot of people, but yeah, I mean, that's the world I live in for the most part, but I feel like we've been veering to the darker side lately just because it seems to be a crowd pleaser. So yeah.
Are people liking the darker stuff? Because I like, I mean, I'll be honest, man, like I love going into Go Get 'Em Tiger for the hang, but that style of shit, I'm actually like not really. I'm more into the stuff over at Tierra Mia.
Gotcha, yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's, yeah. But Go Get 'Em Tiger, the food situation there is super hooked up, you know, so.
Word.
Yeah. And not to cast aspersions on your pulls, dude. Like it's not, your chops are chops. I'm just saying, like, you know, the style of what the beans are and whatnot. It's, you know, it's that bright style.
For sure. Cool, man. Well, let's talk about some music stuff. I'm curious. So when I was talking to Ben Monder recently, you know, I was asking him what he's been listening to, and he said the new Devourment record. And we both love Devourment, obviously, but we're both kind of like smarter than I feel like the average person that would like be into shit that's so awful lyrically. And so I'm curious how you think about that, like how you think about stuff that's so violent, but like, you know, I don't know. What's your take on this?
I mean, I don't even know if the lyrics are, I don't even know if that's the most ignorant aspect of them, really. I mean, the music itself is just so fucking like, I don't know, dude. Yeah. Just like flat brim hats, dude. Just straight wigger slam, dude. It's such a vibe. It's such a vibe. I don't know, man. I don't like, when I think about what I'm trying to do myself, I'll like lay down all these values of like what music should be about. not just what I'm achieving, but what I'm like the way I go about it and my like how it fits into my life and practice and the ritual of like doing, work and knowledge and all this shit. I'm always laying shit down. But then when it comes to what I process from the outside, all of those rules and standards just go away. And it's just like often unclear what I'm really getting from something, to be honest. Because, but see, I don't know. When I say I love devourment, it's like, do I love devourment or do I just love watching like beheading videos on YouTube? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I'm not like, I mean, do I like watching like an hour and a half of world star fights? I mean, is that like art to me? Like, not really. So I mean, maybe that's just what devourment is just like watching an hour and a half of world star fights. Like, I don't know. I mean, but there's chops though. I don't know. It's yeah. You know what I like about that kind of shit? There's this unevenness between the ignorance on the one hand, but then like the intense labor of like on the other hand. You can tell they like rehearse their asses off and like it's actually kind of technical and stuff. And like it's this hyper compartmentalized giving a shit,
Totally.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like
Does that kind of make sense? Or,
I
like,
think so. Yeah. Sorry, there's a little audio breaking up.
you can hear me
Well,
though.
yeah, I can hear you. So I mean, like, it's funny. You can tell that it's technical listening to it, but it's also so muddy and unclear and just brutal that it's like, is this really actually even that technical? And I don't know, it might be.
I think I like that. That's a cool thing about it too, actually. The idea that you would put, I think that about with a lot of like lo-fi shit in general from different styles, that you would put all this effort into like writing and rehearsing these riffs, but then it's like what the riffs are like so muddy, and then how it's recorded is so muddy that it's almost like you're just shitting on all over the work that you did,
Exactly.
or like burying it. There's something tough about that. I actually, yeah, the incoherence of it. I mean, in a way less extreme way, um, and not in the sense of ignorance, but in the sense of like putting all this work in and then having it be like muddied up. Like some of that early Ariel Pink stuff is like, I love that shit. And one of the things I love about it is that it's like it's so like lo-fi and muddy, but it's like the chord progressions and arrangements are all like super like wrought, and
Mhm.
it's like so much effort goes into it, but then it's like filtered through this like I don't give a shit sounding filter. So it has this weird, it's like precious but then totally unprecious like thing happening that I like a lot. Um
Word.
yeah.
Cool, man. So, in just your regular music practice, I'm curious how you sort of think about projects, like you're talking about combining, like the knowledge work of it, and how do you generally like assign sort of like a weight, and like how do you pace your own projects, and just generally how are you conceiving of various musical projects and bringing them into being?
I guess, I mean, I usually have one thing that's like the thing, like the band that is getting the most priority, um as far as like pushing it, like playing shows with it, touring, uh pushing it out there as the main thing that like is going to be coming to your town or whatnot. There's a thing of like whatever you call your main thing, people actually just pay the most attention to that.
Hmm.
For in a weird way, I mean, obviously increased by just touring and doing the work on that. But yeah, like Extra Life was, yeah, I put that out as that's my main thing than other stuff. But it's like but I don't even know if I'd say I put in more actual labor into the writing. I think I end up putting the same amount of work and care into the actual composition of all the different projects, but it's just like it's more just the promoting and the touring, that gets really focused on one thing versus another.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know, these things. Yeah, they'll be, uh, yeah. Like you mean like how do I conceive of these projects before they're started, or you mean like once they're going, or?
Or I guess just like, it sounds like you have a bunch of different projects, and I'm curious how you like. It seems like there's definitely a method to it, and Yeah, I'm just curious, what that thought process is like. This answer is good so far.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
curious.
I mean, like Psalm Zero, yeah. Well, I guess the concept, but sometimes the concepts for these things change though, because after Extra Life, like Extra Life was just going to be like the concept for that. I was like, all right, I'm gonna have a thing that's just the moniker for me running a thing, and that's almost going to be like the moniker for just me in a way, or like
Mhm.
I was thinking of it like Shoo Shoo or Dirty Projectors or Leviathan, like for you talking just across spectrums, like that kind of thing. But then I ended up making this, but then it ended up becoming a little bit more collaborative with the people I was working with, and so then it was a little bit not just synonymous with me, and it was like an actual like band, even though I was kind of writing everything, but still, they're arranging and having input. And then also then it took on this identity that I was like, oh, I'm actually going to quote unquote break this up. Not because I hate this shit now, but just because it's like I'm in a whole different phase to the point where I would want to do stuff with a different name, So it's like sort of like drawing this line of like shedding certain aesthetic parameters. Because I don't know, it's like even when you say like, oh, I'm gonna do whatever I want to do, like, oh, no rules, just do whatever. It's like a project still takes on a character. Like you still end up being inspired by the last thing you did and influencing yourself and like the identity of what the thing is and how people perceive it, like that feeds, so then you're like, oh, Extra Life isn't just me, it's a thing that gained momentum that now is its own thing, so therefore it can die.
Gotcha.
Doesn't mean it has to, but it's just at the time it's like, oh, okay. So but then yeah, sometimes these things change too. Like Psalm Zero, that started off as like I was like, all right, now that Extra Life's done, I'm gonna do stuff under my own name as a composer for other ensembles, like a classical guy, because I get periodically I get asked to do stuff like that. It's like, all right, that's gonna be my own name. And then Psalm Zero, I was like, this is just like a fuck it band. Like this is just me and this guy. This guy Andrew was like a duo project at first. And the whole thing is just it was almost like a punk band. I mean, I never make punk music, but the concept was just like some scummy shit that's
Hmm.
like not even gonna be like pushed as anything. It was just sort of like, let's see what happens with it. But then it was like, oh, I started to get more into it. It's like, oh, let's make this not totally scummy and throwaway. Let's actually like write some shit. And then it kind of got more and more collaborative, and it became this duo thing. So then that was my main band. The classical shit's on the side, then it's like, then it took on that thing of my main thing. It has that concept of like me and this guy doing a duo thing. Then I have this huge falling out with the guy. Um, Never talk to the fucking guy again. So then the concept is like, oh, it's my thing. It's me doing a rock band. So now it's sort of like what Extra Life was, but now I'm gearing it to be more normal and more like a rock band. It actually, this shit all just keeps changing, man. It's yeah.
How much of the aesthetic difference do you feel like is like shedding the sort of medieval influence, or is there some medieval influence in Psalm Zero that I'm not hearing?
There is, but it's just a little more
Toned down.
it's reined into the. I mean, the song "The Last Faith," like that's pretty medieval. Like the at least the vocal melody for that stuff is pretty medieval. But yeah, it's a lot of that stuff is toned down to an extent. But thing is, man, Psalm Zero now, the shit I'm writing now, like after we're done today, is like this shit is the next quote unquote Psalm Zero record is basically going to be like the first Extra Life record. Like
Okay.
I mean, it'll be different because it'll have all this metal shit. It's going to be obviously different. It's fucking 13 years later, but it's going to be weird as shit and very medievaled out. Like, um, way more
Word.
complex. I'm just, yeah.
Well, let's dive into some of this medieval stuff. When did you first get into that?
I kind
Like,
of
is that
like,
in college or?
I kind of gradually like, I didn't get into it by like studying it really. It was really like, my dad had this, Christmas music of the Middle Ages record that he used to play. Um, Around the house just around Christmas time. Like, it was just like this some I don't know, just like tradition. Like he would play it. And I still have that. That's I think that's Noah Greenberg and the New York Pro Musica. I think it is. Anyway, so yeah, just that record, I got really into that. And then and then I don't know how I got it. Yeah, I started to check out some of the composers that were on that, Leonin and Perotin. And so that's like the 12th century organum composers, the Ars Antiqua composers. So I started like checking them out. And so that was in college, where I wasn't studying it as part of study, but I was like going to like the music library at school, and like and taking out these records and stuff.
So you're more kind of just consuming it and not necessarily like geeking out on the theory behind it?
I started to geek out a little later, because I took like after college I would take these private lessons like once in a while, like not like on some like course of study, but like whenever I could. And like with this guy Mark Stambaugh, who was like head of he was head of composition at Manhattan School of Music at the time. And he's just like one of these guys that like they're like so just like a repository of knowledge of like the history of Western music that is just exhaustive on a level that you just couldn't even possibly touch. Like you just mention like one part of like a Wagner opera, and he like sits down at the keyboard. It's like, oh yeah, right. Like the inner voice from like the Nibelung, or like going up the hill, and like the viola. I mean, it's just like, dude, forget it. You know, he's like one of those cats. Like, but but yeah, so he taught me a little bit about counterpoint, like like writing counterpoint in not in a medieval style, but in the style of Palestrina. So that's like 16th century sort of high Renaissance. So he did take me through some of the species counterpoint exercises. I don't know, have you studied like composition? Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So yeah, just doing like species counterpoint, and sort of, so I did actually get to a chops point where I can like write, you know, I can like write some like canons and stuff, like an imitative counterpoint that's like pretty solidly in that 16th century high Renaissance style. But then like I don't really, so then there's like that, but then sort of influenced by the earlier medieval stuff just by listening. And then those kind of combined with me kind of, you know, I don't like follow any rules from that stuff, but absorbing those conventions though that does affect how you write for sure.
Yeah,
You
most
know?
definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, and just this vibe of like there are specific things, like just ways that little like just cadences that how they resolve. I mean, just like, yeah, just specific little cadences. The Burgundian cadence, you know, I fuck with these little things, man. Yeah.
Picardy cadence.
Oh yeah.
There's
Picardy.
that.
It's a Picardy third. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not like, yeah, I'm no scholar on that stuff, but I've done work checking it out, you know, like actually
Gotcha.
stuff. Yeah.
So in a band like Extra Life, how much of that is notated when you're composing it?
That's a good question. Yeah, some of the like the stuff on the first record, a lot of that was notated. Like the stuff that's so mathed out and like complex that you're like, how would you learn that? It's like that's notated. Like that's as one would expect. Then yeah, and on the second album to an extent. Yeah, on Secular Works and on Made Flesh, that stuff's pretty notated. The later stuff gets kind of simpler, you know? And also the later stuff, it's like it's more like the melodies are kind of complex, but then like the other people's parts, like I didn't really write their parts as much, and it would be like Nick would come up with drum parts, Kaylee would come up. He was playing guitar at that point. I played guitar on the first couple records. Then Kaylee, who used to play violin, he was playing guitar on the third record. Yeah, they'd come up with their own parts and stuff for that. So it's like a little different. But yeah, notation. I mean, notation is sick, dude. That's the original sequencer, man. You know what I mean? But it has like a sort of. But then there's that weird social dynamic though to it, where it's like a sequencer. You're sequencing a machine, but when you're notating music in a classical music way, it's kind of dark, man, because you're like sequencing, right? I mean, you're like sequencing people. You're like using a technology. It's
Yeah.
like it's like cybernetic kind of. I mean, you're essentially like they have this like code to like read shit, and then you're like making this code. It's like of course there's interpretation. I mean, there's obviously uh with classical music, obviously there's like with most of it there's a sense of interpretation and like how you play it. You know, you give somebody Bach, it's a million ways to like, as a instrumentalist, you know, a performer, to bring your own artistry to it, obviously. But then it's like the more and more complex shit gets, they're almost like the less and less room there is for people's own artistry to come into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so when you're,
totally.
I mean, if you, I don't know, man, if you got like, if you got someone from a top flight classical music ensemble on here, they might just be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, shut up. Like, you're an idiot. Like, it's very possible, but like, I mean, if you check out like a Helmut Lachenmann string quartet, like, dude, no disrespect to like Arditi or like whoever's played this thing, but it's like, it's hard for me to see how you would be like, man, I'm like putting my own spin on that. I mean, you're just trying to like nail shit that's just like at the limit of like cybernetic like bandwidth of like fucking like even executing the shit. So I don't know. Maybe that's not true though. Maybe that's like with certain stuff, because I know Feldman, you know, with Feldman people, that's simpler music though. That's simpler music. You a Morton Feldman fan?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I was listening to something where he was talking about, or like reading something where he was talking about the how everything is so precise, and it's like, no, my music is perfect. And you know, when you are at that time scale, you're actually allowed to, or you're able to keep it quote perfect because there's no room for interpretation. It's just all mapped out perfectly.
He
And so
he
that's
he
that's
he
cool.
he said that. Did he say that there's no room for interpretation, and that
Basically,
that's
yeah.
interesting? Okay, that's interesting to hear, because I was actually gonna about to say, because I was saying that about like post-war like complex classical music, but then I actually thought of him as an example of there being room for interpretation, just because I remembered I did this I took this master class with Peter Kotick. You know him from
Mm-hmm.
SEM Ensemble. He's old. He's like maybe like an 80 now or something, but he's a flautist. He was like one of the first people to like perform some like Stockhausen stuff in the 70s in the States, and he's like very down with Cage and then that school of stuff. Anyway, but so like, yeah, I saw him give this master class on like performing Feldman, and he was like, dude, like we don't play this shit exactly. Like they were just showing these bars of like these quintuplets over like, and he was kind of like, as he was kind of like, dude, as long as he's like, we're not doing science here, we're not doing surgery, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I just make sure that if I get a 5 going against a 3, he's like, we make sure that it sparkles, we make sure that the things aren't that they're not lining up the way a 5 and a 3 would not line up. But he was like, dude, we're not doing. So anyway, so interesting. So Feldman said to play the shit right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting. He's a
I mean,
macho. He's a macho motherfucker, though, man. I mean, he might have just been on some like, you know what I'm saying, like just power
absolutely,
moves.
yeah.
Like
Yeah, I think the quote was something along the lines of like, when you scale it up to like 3 hour pieces, you're dealing with, a whole other set of problems that you have to sort of solve. But like a lot of the problems of like, the 15, 25-minute piece are basically not issues anymore. So kind of interesting.
but did he said that in terms of interpretation, not in terms of composition? Because I can understand in terms of composition being like the 20-minute piece is a totally different set of concerns than like a 3-hour piece. Like that I could see, but I wonder why interpretation would be a different issue.
Or maybe it was
With
just,
that
maybe
kind
it
of
wasn't
stuff.
as much interpretation as it was just like the placement of everything, and how there isn't really like, I feel like everything's sort of built in already. Like you don't have to worry about sort of like adjusting tempo here or there. But,
Yeah. No, I know it. Yeah, I could kind of see that. Like, yeah, it's like making something breathe. It's like, yeah, it's like you're not dealing with these like little gestures that were like the small variation. Yeah, I could sort of see that. Yeah. Yeah.
so a few episodes ago, I was interviewing this guy who's a theorbo player, and he's like an
Oh,
early
sick.
musician guy, and he was what was I going to say about him? Boom, 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 boom. I'm brain farting. Sorry.
That's sick. You had a Theorbo player, man. I should have done more homework actually checking out the previous episodes, man. I should have boned up for this because that's sick.
It's all good. He's actually doing this guitar company where he's making these interchangeable necks for classical guitars. He'll eventually have them for steel strings, but you can swap out the temperament of them, so you can get like Pythagorean comma temperaments and stuff like this. And man, hearing his shit, like it's the most in tune guitar I've ever heard, and it's so beautiful. Because I think the guitar has all these awful tuning issues, and I don't know if that's anything that bothers you, but
Well, the
I've been
fucking
going around.
G, dude. The G is just like the devil, dude. I mean, it's like never in tune. Yeah.
Mhm. I
But
mean, the issue with like the major third not being in the center, like it's not a symmetrical instrument. It's
yeah,
just like
yeah.
makes me mad. But
Yeah, man.
uh,
What was his name? I mean, I'll check it out after this. But what
oh,
the
Michael Kadurka.
Michael Kadurka? He's an American
Yeah.
guy, or
Yeah.
yeah?
He teaches over at Arkansas State. Yeah,
No shit.
but we went to
Arkan
USC together.
Nice. So you go to Arkansas State, you're dealing with like Theorbo players and shit. Like that's the hang there.
I mean, I think that's just his gig, but
Yeah. No, that's sick.
yeah, dude. Well, let's talk about Z's a little bit and sort of get into the technicality conversation we've been having remotely.
Yeah.
So I feel like Z's, is this great exemplar of like fucking discipline in music, and it seems like discipline is sort of gone. And as I feel like as electronic music becomes more prevalent, there's less incentive to actually get good at an instrument. So I'm curious if you think that basically like instruments are becoming less relevant in that respect, and like I don't know, do you think instruments are on the way out?
Yeah, I think they're kind of on the way out, but I don't think that discipline is actually going downhill. I think being an electronic musician, I think people that are doing deep stuff are undoubtedly engaging in intense levels of discipline. But it seems like discipline, though, it just isn't like openly trumpeted as a value.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That's all. I mean, it's sort of like I think a lot of yeah, I think I think just culturally there's like it's like not considered cool. World of cool music, it's not considered cool to just be this nerd that
Mm-hmm.
like just like like on its own, like for its own. You never want to practice for its own sake, but like you never like someone who's making amazing electronic music, like they're they spend hours and hours and hours like working on their shit in a way that is disciplined, but like they don't like it's not presented as this cool thing of just like every day I do this and like it's part of my spiritual like prayer, like what I mean, the way like a jazz guy
Mm-hmm.
does. Jazz musicians, it's very much it's like, oh no man, 4 hours a day I practice. It's like part of your like sense of who you are, like just the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I
I
like
suppose with
yeah, yeah, sorry, no.
no, it's cool. With electronic music, it seems like the virtuosity of it doesn't actually seem to come through the same way, because like doing like a little arpeggiator thing, it's obviously easy to do on a like on Ableton or whatever, but it's something you could never play on guitar. And so I don't know. Do you feel like that lack of sort of physical virtuosity makes it hit differently for you?
I don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, because you are dealing with the body a little differently, right? I mean, when you're like really when you're practicing the guitar or the drums or something, yeah, you are doing something to your motor skills and your
Mm-hmm.
brain that is like very particular. Um, so yeah, I don't know if that's different with electron. Well, it definitely would have a different physical quality. But I don't know. See, some of this stuff, man, it may just be getting subtler and subtler. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Just what it means to like program. Because like, I can't remember whether it was Derek Bailey or somebody said like technique. They like define technique as just being like technique is the way you touch your instrument. Like they just defined it, which is interesting to me. I can't remember if it was Derek Bailey. Like it was some guitar player. It might have just been like Nels Klein or someone like, like not as famous or something. But I don't know. That phrase always stuck with me, like the way you touch your instrument, because first of all, you're talking about touch, so there's this like physical thing, but you're not even talking about an action yet. You're literally talking about the moment of like a thing physically interfacing with your body, like literally just that moment,
Mm-hmm.
saying that like all of virtuosity, all of technique is in that touching moment and not even in all like of what and when I say, he says the way you touch your instrument, it's making it like qualitative and not quantitative. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, how well you touch your instrument or with what degree of whatever. It's just like how. So that is kind of sick to me in some way. I don't know exactly how to take that phrase and make it into a whole thing, but I've thought about that a lot. The way you, so yeah, so then you practiced a million hours a day to change how you touch your instrument.
Mm-hmm.
I guess. So I mean, I feel like I don't know with electronic music, it would be the same kind of thing, man. It's like the way you quote unquote touch.
Your sound waves.
Sound was, yeah, man. Seriously,
Yeah.
the way you like touch a fucking some weird like fucking hardware, some filter that you just ordered off of fucking like eBay, some Soviet fucking like
Mhm.
high pass filter, whatever people get into. I'm really not into that hardware snob shit though. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely not. No, that's
I
not me
mean,
at
it's
all.
like, yeah, I get why that shit is cool, but people will be like, oh, nothing human sounds cool, man. Like, have you ever thought of getting into? I'm like, are you buying? Because I mean, if you buy me this shit, fine, but I'm not like, but yeah, I don't know, technique, dude. Yeah, that has been a big part of that's a big part of growing up, though, man. Just practicing with jazz and stuff, just to like, um, it's a big part of building self-esteem as a kid.
Mhm.
It's a big part of being like, I'm like going to become a man like John Coltrane, like.
Yeah, yeah. So I was talking to this dude about these sort of like, I guess like models of art, and one of them, that I sort of got into, and that question I sent you and Jeremiah is, basically art as signaling. And the funny thing is that he tied this back similarly to fascist aesthetics, which you got into a little bit, sort of like with this, the thing you were talking about with like hierarchy in music, and like the left and right wing of, I guess, like riffing. And so I thought this was interesting, but your take was a little bit different than mine. And yeah, I thought it was interesting to just see that he also landed on something being sort of fascist aesthetics for this hierarchy. And I don't know, I'm curious what you think of that.
um wait, I'll put a finer point on it, like, because I can't remember exactly, I can't remember exactly how we landed.
I mean, I guess you were getting into like how the punk sort of DIY aesthetic, is like, all you have to do is like learn the Stooges riff or whatever, and then like
Yeah.
you have, the uber technical like black metal people who, at the end of the day, have some fucking bunk ideology, and uh, it's just kind of weird to have that dichotomy of left and right with kind of like extreme technique and kind of extreme inclusivity of technique.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny. I don't know, because we were like talking about with like political implications of stuff. It's just like everything always like goes to like quote unquote fascism, as far as like this pole of like something to consider, or not quote unquote, literally just capital F, but it's like sometimes I like to contemplate that as this extreme pole of what something could be, as this like scary example of it, but then dial it back and be like, okay, well, like what's the like not fucked up version of like something that's like a little to the right, you know what I mean? It just not even politically, but just like psychologically or culturally, you know what I mean? So it's like, that's why I
Mm-hmm.
always think about jazz. I'm like, you never think of jazz as a right-wing music, but anything, yeah, anything that has like some sense of like good, better, best, and you're like enforcing that, and there's like a certain push, there is something kind of scary, I guess, about that. I mean, or on elitist, like just a sort of um sense of, yeah. I mean, okay, I don't support this, but I mean, I've heard that like, Miles and Charlie Parker, I mean, they would actually like beat people, like they drag people out back of a jam session and beat them up just for playing some bullshit. I mean, I doubt that happened, like a million times.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I've heard that. I'm sure that happened at least a couple times if people like were talking about that as an idea. I mean, I'm not saying do that, but I mean, can you imagine doing that now at like some indie rock show and just dragging some fucking kid off by the scruff of the neck and being like, that shit was weak, dude. You're gonna go home with a fucking black eye, man. I mean, just that psychology, like it's just, I mean, the fact that people were doing that who like aren't, well, I was gonna say they aren't utter psychopaths. Maybe you could say Miles was a complete and utter psychopath. I don't know, but just quality control, man. I mean, this is why I keep talking about, Sloterdijk, man. I keep coming back to this, and I've been harping on this like one micro thing that he said is like not even his main thing, but that shit about vertical tension, man. I love that, dude. It's just this thing of like, doesn't have to be some dehumanizing hierarchy or some horrific fascist thing, but some sense of good, better, best, pulling you in place, pulling a community in place, pulling. like, I don't know, just that sense of, or at the very least, when you're practicing, having a concept of that, even if it doesn't have to be like literally enacted in the world of like, oh, like, you know, whatever, like Miles gets to beat me up and I deserve it because I suck, or like, you know what I'm saying? Charlie Parker gets to like fuck my wife because like I fucking ate shit at the jam session. I mean, you know, it's like, it's not, this doesn't have to be some like literal real life brutality, but having some kind of sense of, you know, like that hierarchy that drives you to strive, you know, like there's
Yeah, it makes
something
me think.
sorry, no, go ahead.
Makes me think of no, it's cool. It makes me think of, I guess, like kind of like the glorification that you see in chef culture, like, you know, where the, you know, the cook is like cutting something, and you know the chef comes by and says some fucking dickish thing, and everybody's like, oh my god, yeah, chef, 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 oh yeah, chef. And I feel like, you know, being in food, I've seen people grow out of that and just like mature generally, but like there's something to be said about actually, you know, like being straightforward and like, you fucking sucked today, you need to get better. And so yeah, I guess I haven't seen any of that in music or in food or coffee in a while. And so I don't know, somebody.
It's there's got to be, yes, some quality control, you know. But then of course, you know, we got all edgy, like we got all edgy about it and had to make it in this. I mean, because it's funny to like take it like what the fuck were we talking about? Like you said about fitness, signaling fitness, and so I said some shit about like was talking about like selective pressure in the scene and like bottlenecking of musical traits. I mean, it's like turning into some eugenics shit. I mean, you know, it's like obviously that's creepy and like it's taking the sick place, you know, whatever. But I mean, it's not like, it's only a couple of steps further than just like giving someone a bad vibe for sucking, you know. I mean, there has to be some, like, I don't know. It's like, but then, you know, then there's also encouragement and generosity. And that's the thing, you know, it's like jazz culture is like, I think it's always been like both, you know, there's this inclusivity and like encourage everyone to come in and this inclusivity, but then also the ball breaking, you know what I mean? Of course, then you say ball breaking and hear this on a more, you know, it's like, so how much of this is like gendered shit? How much of this is just the way men throw down versus, you know, the way women, I don't know, you know, like, I don't, you know, maybe it's just, yeah, maybe it's just some male shit. Yeah. Um, can't remember what I was gonna say. I was thinking, you know, the comedian Theo Vaughn. Do you know that
Mhm.
guy?
Yeah.
I'm pretty into that dude, and he said some shit. I think it was on a podcast, or no, it wasn't a special. He was like, he said something about, he was like, yeah, I admire this guy, I admire him, and then he goes, admire is an old fashioned idea. It's when someone's better than you, but you like them. You know, which I thought that's just very like simple and beautiful, man. And it's like that there is something old fashioned about that. Like, you know, like the totally modern thing is kind of like, well, no one's better than anyone. What, like, you think you're better than me? I mean, what makes you better? Like everything's just so resentful that you like can't ever just be like, I know my place, dude. That's Charlie Parker, dude. I can't fuck right. You know, or like
Mhm.
I don't know. Like I was on that group chat. I was on that live stream thing with do you know Tegan Meyer, or
I watched a good chunk of that, but
that thing?
I know her a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the thing with Reza Nagarastani was on there.
Mhm.
You know
No,
him, Reza Nagarastani.
no, no.
Oh, he's sick, man. He's anyway. Yeah, well, so this won't mean as much if you don't know his shit, but he's I don't know. He's only a little older than me, but I mean, he's like a very accomplished, like serious philosopher guy. He's not like an artist guy who's kind of into it and has some ideas. He's like, you know, making serious work and like, you know, it's like publishes stuff on Urbanomic and shit. I don't know. It's like, so we're doing this thing and it's like, you know, it's like obviously like the cat, you know what I mean? So he's kind of breaking balls and kind of being a little bit arrogant and kind of fucking putting people in their place and interrupting them and shit. And I'm like, this is good. Like, this is appropriate. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like, there's like, I feel like most people, it's just like, oh, like who's, you know, that's mean. And I'm like, well, you know, he's laying down the hierarchy thing. If you want to get up, then you got to give it back to him in some way that's actually meaningful.
Mhm.
And if you can't, then just know your place and just fucking be psyched that he's even there. You know, it's like, I don't know. It's like just hierarchy. I don't know. Just accepting the beauty, the healthy
Totally.
hierarchy, you know? Yeah.
Cool, man. I'm curious, as somebody that's sort of been in both jazz and metal, what the different woodsheds look like to you.
That's a cool question. I feel like jazz, it's super clear because it's like, even the term woodshed just comes from jazz. So it's like, I mean, that's just that culture, man. People, I don't know, people, what, what do you do with jazz? You have like there's like a body of standards. People
Hmm.
play tunes, you know, people try to spend years doing the craziest amount of shit. I mean, you mean like you mean like when I used to play practice jazz, or you mean just like in general, just what it looks like in the two cultures? Like,
I mean, I guess to give you a sense, like, you know, I'm much more accomplished as a jazz musician than I am as a metal musician. I used to do metal back in high school, but I got randomly inspired. I was like, I'm gonna fucking learn how to riff again, and I realized I had no idea how to do it anymore. And so I was like, okay, but I have to have chromatic this and that, and like it didn't. I didn't have the same sort of path of how I was gonna approach it. So I was like, how do people practice metal? Because half of it has to be like a compositional thing, and half of it has to be just riffing and shit, like getting your fingers worked up. So I'm curious what like a metal woodshed looks like to you.
oh yeah, well, it's, I mean, that's a cool question, because I don't even really I never had a thing with metal that was a woodshed thing. I mean,
Gotcha.
I never had a thing um like a practice regimen of working on shit. It's
Hmm.
only been the writing thing, you know. But to me, I mean, that's
Interesting.
shedding, because you're like, I mean, you're just like getting better and better and editing and revising, and you know, it's like it's the same meditative kind of you know, practice, you know. Um, it's same thing, you know, with like with jazz. I mean, I would be like, you know, I'd like practice improvising, but with such a limited set of materials that I pick out like one mode or one little like pitch set or something, that it ends up being like almost like composing, because you're just focusing on like one little thing for hours and hours. But but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of different with, I know like metal people that are into shredding. I mean, people who are into like actually being virtuoso instrumentalists and like as soloists. Um, they have shit with modes and melodic patterns that's probably very similar to jazz, I would imagine.
Hmm.
Um, like, yeah, I mean, I think those guys, like, I don't know, like, you know, Dave Davidson from Revocation, you know, that guy.
Hmm.
I don't know. He's like, yeah, he's a friend of mine. I mean, he's like one of the like the guitar, like high tech metal guitar guys right now, you know, for like technical death metal and shit. Um, and yeah, I think his practice regimen is very similar to jazz in the sense of like melodic patterns that are difficult
Hmm.
to play. You know, probably like I think a lot of metal, there's like super shredded out metal dudes like on a state of the art vibe would get into that, like do some like metal version of like that, you know, the Yusef Lateef book.
Hmm.
Um, this
That scales book.
that Scales book. I can't. It's like in the room actually someplace. I can't. I can't see it from here, but it's
Sort of like some sort of like Slonimsky type shit.
that's the one that Coltrane used, right?
Yeah.
The yeah, yeah. I think that's what some cats use on a metal tip, you know, for sure. I think a lot of the, I mean that stuff's cool because it's like actually musical. It's not um just like senseless shapes or whatever, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think that's what metal woodshedding is like. But it's not the same culture though, man. I think I don't think it's the same kind of. It definitely not for me, man. I mean,
Hmm.
well, I mean for me, okay, so like high school, I had like the jazz thing of like studying jazz, playing tunes, trying to come up with my own shit over tunes, scales, modes, etc. Um, but so for me, that same energy and type of focus as an adult is transferred into like composing really, you know, and
Hmm.
producing now with Nothing Human, which is composing. So I mean for me it's the same like type of focus, but it's not at all the same stuff,
Hmm.
right? I
I
mean as
guess.
far as, you know, yeah.
Yeah. When I got back into this metal stuff, I found myself just like putting on a metronome and trying to do downstrokes until my forearm was hurting. And I was like, this is just fucking going to the gym. And so maybe that's what metal is about partially.
Nah, man, I mean it's only, but I mean that shit is only like, you should only practice it if you're like that's what you want to write and shit. I mean, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's like it's not like in 1980, like it's not like Kirk Hammett like came up with the idea of doing that kind of picking and then just like was like, oh, I'm gonna get really good at that and then write some riffs based on that. I mean, you know what I mean? It's just more like you start writing some riffs and you're like, you just play them a ton until they're just tighter and tighter and tighter. I think also, like, I don't know about metal specifically, but just guitar based like rock in general based music, whether it's punk or hardcore or whatever. I mean, even with punk where it's supposedly like fuck it or whatever, I mean, people rehearse a lot, you know, like bands rehearse a ton. So I mean, a lot of the practicing gets done with like rehearsing, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, classical cats will like practice for years and hours and years, and then, you know, but then like when it comes to actually like getting a piece together, I mean, they'll fucking run it for like 20 minutes and just go nail it, you know what I mean? Whereas like if you're like in a band, I mean, you've been there, you know, you play the song, you're just like, let's do it again. Just do it again 4 times.
Tighten it up.
Let's go. Yeah, you know, and it's like, I mean, bands that I've been in, it's more methodical. It's a little more classical. You know, it's like, oh no, let's run the B section. No, let's like loop these 4 bars. Like, you know, it does get a little more classical-ish, but I think a lot of people in metal and rock and shit, it's like I bet they don't even fucking seem to analyze this shit that much. It's just like play it a million times and it just gets better and better and better, and then that's the shedding, you know, really is just everyone shedding together. So yeah, so that's what I'm saying. You know, punk, even scrappy punk bands do get tight by, you know, maybe even not by rehearsing, maybe just by touring, you know, like literally just getting tight on the road. You know, bands get tight as fuck. They just don't have that. It isn't that ascetic. The process of getting the music tight isn't that solo ascetic prayer, like I'm spending time with myself and God type attitude. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm kind of like, I don't know, when I talk about like, so with some of that practice and hierarchy shit, like sometimes I like ham up or like overplay the kind of thing of just like, man, like just egalitarian punk shit is lazy, dude. Like we need discipline. Like I don't actually think that shit's worse. I'm just more into stuff that has a like solo component of like that kind of aesthetic, you know, like I just like that path. Like I was saying with just like, you know, I'll lay down these things of the way it's supposed to be, but really it's just more like that's how I like to develop, you know, is more like even working in these band contexts, I go for more of that jazz approach of like working on stuff myself, you know, and like bettering myself. So yeah, I mean, yeah, Z's, dude. There was a lot of all of that. We'd all be writing music, so there was the solo composing asceticism. We'd all be practicing each other's pieces religiously solo, and then getting together and running it in a rock band way of us all rehearsing the shit a billion times. I mean, that shit was just like labor.
Now, in college, I was really interested in making like excessively complicated music, and I found that it always failed because nobody wanted to play it. And I'm curious how you find cats that are interested in actually putting in the time and like, you know, doing complicated shit. And is that just a New York thing?
Yeah, it's a New York thing. It's also just clout, man. I mean, if you just get people to do shit, I was kind of being a dick, but like also like there's this, I mean, I don't know, like, well, I mean, yeah, I mean with Z's, those guys got me to do that shit just because they were doing such sick shit, and it just blew my mind. And I was like, I want to roll with them, and you know, I was like, can I write shit too? They're like, yeah, and I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. You know what I mean? So it's like there's a sort of exchange there. You know, I mean, I guess to an extent. But yeah, but okay, I joke about clout and I joke about New York neurosis being a factor. Okay, those two things, it's a kind of a joke but kind of totally true, but there's a limit to that, especially as you get older and money needs to come into play, you know what I mean?
For
It's
sure.
like you can't, I mean, so this is the thing, you know, it's like I can't, like yeah, like Z's couldn't form with a bunch of people in their 30s. I mean, maybe, but you know, you're in your 30s calling other people in their 30s and being like, yo, let's start like the most complex shit ever. No one's getting paid. Like, I'm going to write most of the shit. like we're gonna play, who knows if anyone's gonna come to the shows, but maybe we'll like build some shit up. It's just like no one's doing that in their fucking 30s, man. But
Mhm.
like doing that in your early 20s, it's like not even lame to do that. It's like kind of sick to do that, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, going back to that sort of signaling model, I feel like that's, signaling a wealth of time and a wealth of sort of like collective interest in the project, which is, cool thing to signal. That's fitness and resources, I guess, to some extent. But
yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
think
yeah.
it was cringy though. So
Fitness and resources. No, I fucking love this, dude. Well, because okay, there's like signaling resources. Signaling resources just is what it is. That's just like, or that's either time or money, right? That's either I have time because I'm young, or I have money because I'm rich, or whatever, or like there's or money because there's institutional funding or something. Um, usually it's institutional funding is how complex music comes together. Typically, right? I mean, that's just Um, but right, so that's resources, but then fitness. I'm interested in this, like when you say signaling fitness, because it's like, um, I keep coming back to just the phrase. It's just based internet, like just it's it's like it's like, I mean, not in a bad way. I'm just saying when you
Right.
said that, I'm like, he checks out that shit online. But I mean, but we knew that. But it's like, but fucking fitness. But then yeah, but see, like the other thing though is like when you say fitness, does that mean ach- uh, achieved fitness by correctly using the resources to increase your fitness and get into shape because you like, because you made wise use of the resources? Or are we just talking about fitness like signaling that you just naturally are like hardwired to like be talented,
That's
which is the
interesting.
most
Like
base, like
innate fitness versus like acquired fitness. I guess
yeah,
acquired fitness lands a little bit better, although maybe subconsciously innate fitness lands better.
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's like what's more inspiring? Like it's not inspiring to anyone to signal that like your mom and dad pay your rent, and so there you have all this time to fucking make complex music for no fucking reason. That's very uninspiring. People are just like,
Yeah, yeah.
ugh, like that's just like gross. But then then it's like, yeah, signaling that you made good use of your time and practiced all the shit to get fit. That's inspiring. That's inspiring because it's like, oh, he like lifted weights or whatever.
Mhm.
Then like, yeah, but then like signaling that you're just have God-given talent, it's like, is that inspiring or not? Like that's the most like that's just like hero shit. Like, is that, yeah. Like, is that like, oh, I could be as great as that person, or no? Is that more just like that person is a great man of history and must be regarded as like an unachievable like Odysseus model of like being better? I don't know. I don't know.
Thinking about like, you brought up Miles, and I'm thinking of Coltrane and how Coltrane obviously put in so much fucking time in the woodshed to, like I don't think that he was necessarily signaling fitness whatsoever. He just had it, and it's kind of just there in the background, just like I'm a beast. But then Miles, he's kind of lacking. Like, I mean, people always get in trouble for saying that he didn't have technique, but I mean, he's no fucking Coltrane. But
No.
at the same time, maybe he's signaling sort of like novelty or something like that, like sort of the uniqueness of perspective. Like what do you think that Miles is signaling that Coltrane
Yeah,
isn't?
that's such a good question. I know Miles and Coltrane, there's such unbelievably deep poles
Hmm.
of just like the way, yeah, the way an artist can be like inspiring, just like the way of being like a bad motherfucker, you know what I mean? Because yeah, it's like Miles, he's so like of the earth, you know what I mean? He's so just like, it's like not like this beam of light directly up to God and stuff. He's just like, I'm out here, like I'm out here, like I'm a man, like
Hmm.
in the way, it is very much like in the world and shit. um yeah, what is he signaling? I don't know. I love that shit at the end of his life. I was watching some interview with him where he was talking about, you ever see that interview from 1982 where Bryant Gumbel is interviewing him?
Maybe.
It's fucking hilarious, man. It's like, it's like, yeah, he was just like, how do you, he was just like, Brian Gumbel, he's like, so how do you like choose who to play with, like when you, the musician that you want to collaborate, like do you like audition them, or do you like, go see them play in another band or something? And he was just like, he's like, I can just tell by the way, just the way they walk, just the clothes they wear, just their carriage, man. I mean, I don't know if that's really true. Like literally, I'm sure like he would have to hear Dave Liebman play before fucking hiring him in a band. But like, I thought that was a cool, like, just really weird way for him to put shit out there, just to be like, dude, I'm just signaling just attitude. Like he's just like, it's vibe, and like that's it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, he practiced his ass off though. You know what I mean? I don't know. He was studying at Juilliard, and then he was hanging with Charlie Parker. I mean, I know
So I guess
Charlie
to some
Parker.
extent it's like status signaling, maybe.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's. I guess there's a certain like, yeah, if you're talking about just attitude, there is a certain like just willpower element to it, right? It's like that vibe of like, it's like ineffable spirit,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not necessarily like God given. So like someone whose vibe is just like, I've got a fucking bad attitude the way I talk and walk. It's like, yeah, it's somewhere between. It to me, the way I experience that kind of signaling, it lands somewhere between like, this is God given and you just need to give it up because I have it more. But also there's an element of like, you can have this too if you just fucking like just start putting it out there, you know. um yeah, yeah,
Word.
I think that's a part of a lot of shit. Well, I don't know. Yeah, is that attitude shit, is that a part of all music? I don't think that's a part of Coltrane,
I
his
don't think so
music.
either.
That was a part of Z's though, man. Z's was definitely about a certain like arrogance, like a certain swagger and shit. You know what I mean? Like it was, the vibe of that band was not like, man, like I hope you like that. You know, it's like I'm really grateful. Like, it was, you know, there was definitely a thing of just like, yeah, like of just like, yeah, you guys need to recognize that we're the shit right now. You know, in New York. Like, I mean, humorously, there's always a humor to that. There has to be some humor to that, but. Yeah, signaling though, it's like that thing about signaling. It's like, I love it and I hate it, man. I love it. I love that you're bringing it up, so I have no objection that you're using that word. But it's
Mm-hmm.
like, when people see that word signaling, it's all like, it's super interneted out, like just on the level of, because everyone's signaling, and everything you do is so social media, you know, everything is part of some signal. And I mean, it comes a lot from like game theory, right? I mean, isn't that like very much a game theory thing?
Yeah, and like I guess like economics and game theory. The two main people that talk about it, I think, are like Robin Hanson and Jeffrey Miller. I'm more familiar with Robin Hanson, and he has this whole thing of like the elephant in the brain. And basically, like, unless you're peeing, you're basically, or like you're scratching your butt, you're basically signaling. Like anything you do is signaling. So I think that's a like a popular economic model nowadays, and you know the people
Yeah,
I follow are into that.
yeah. There's a level of cynicism to it though that I find to often itself be a form of signaling. I've checked out Jeffrey Miller stuff online. I don't want to. I don't know, man. I don't want to like
Oh
randomly
yeah,
trash some Evo psych guy for like no fucking reason on like our little podcast. Like what's in that for me? But I was just kind of like, I don't know. Some of this shit. I mean, just the idea that like it's like some Nietzschean shit of like, there is no one's dealing with truth of any kind. Everything is just some will to power in this fucking like, you know, just like war of all against all shit. Sometimes I'm just like, man, if you really felt that way, you would be fucking unhappy. I mean, it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, like just breaking everything down to that is like, I don't know, it's a little depressing, maybe. I don't know.
oh,
I
yeah. I
mean,
mean,
like,
it's depressing, but we aren't. I mean, my people, we aren't depressed by things like that.
my people, what, Jewish or no? Or
No, no, no. I guess like
like,
heady transhumanists.
word. I'm not a transhumanist, dog. I'm pretty humanist, but this precisely for that same reason that I'm so obsessed with the limits of it
Mhm.
lately. You know, for sure. This is why I'm into these, you know, this land and all these guys. Um, I mean, yeah, the whole game theory thing of it all. Well, I find that shit very one of the things I find very useful and beautiful and attractive about that, just like considering things that way, is just the fact that entire sections like most of online culture will not even look at itself for a minute in terms of those things. So the fact that, I mean, people need to at least have some fucking self-awareness that they're signaling and have some self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I
Like,
think that signaling to some extent isn't even bad. Like, I think that virtue signaling, for instance, is like it's probably good here and there because if you don't do it, how is anybody going to know that you have any virtue?
right. No, true. No, I know. I guess I'm complaining about just the most cynical aspects of it and shit because it's like, yeah, just this idea that any expression of compassion online is like virtue signaling, quote unquote. I mean, it's like literally just being like, you're like, I believe this rape allegation, and the guy's like, she's not gonna fuck you, bro. I mean, it's like that shit. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's like,
That's dark.
well, that's all day
Yeah,
online. I mean, right? I mean, you've seen this. Yeah. See,
yeah.
maybe you're less creeped out by the shit because you've gone less, you've checked out less of the extremes of how creepy it gets or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Maybe.
I don't. You're not familiar with that trope. It's just like some
I guess
woman.
like maybe I've seen a little bit of that, but like
Just like some woman's getting just
you're right.
verbally abused online, and some guy's like, "Yeah, it's kind of fucked up," and everyone's just like, "She's not gonna fuck you, bro. Stop virtue signaling." It's just like, Jesus Christ, man. It's like the guy was literally like, "Get your hands off of her." It's like that level of like fucking. In any case, but no, but the signaling thing it is important to consider because I have friends who I love dearly and they're very smart, but they're online screaming political shit where I'm like, man, I'm not even saying you don't believe this. I'm not even calling you a liar, but I'm like, have you not even considered for a second at least the extent to which you're signaling this shit for self-interested reasons? I mean, like you've never even thought of that. Like you have
Yeah.
no self-awareness of your own game playing. Doesn't mean it's all bullshit or you don't really have virtue, but it's like, dog, like this is a game that you're playing to some extent, dude. You know what I mean? It's like,
Totally.
yeah, especially when you're not like trying to do anything in the world other than just say opinions online. It's just like, bro, like I don't, in any case, but yeah, but there's virtue signaling and then there's vice signaling, or not. I mean, people don't call it that, but like tough signaling. You know what I mean? So I think
What do you mean by that?
well, just the opposite of virtue signaling, just like it's like signaling that you're like not offended by shit and like you don't give a fuck or like you're a troll or
Mm.
yeah, calling someone else's virtue signaling out as a way of you signaling that you're like hip to bullshit and like you don't
Mm-hmm.
like whatever, that you're like
Your
not.
intelligence signaling or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The fucking brain guy name or whatever. Yeah. The fucking Wojak with the brain. Yeah. Um I don't know. Yeah, no, signaling's fun though, yeah. No. Sometimes I will get cringed out by myself though, because I'll like look back at my like Twitter feed and I'm just like, ooh, you're just like correctively signaling shit. Like you said something that was like a little bit like edgy, and then your next one was like, I'm not racist though, and then the next one was like, ooh, but like it's just like this like I'm just like, ugh, like fucking games, dude. Games. But I mean, you really think was John Coltrane signaling? Was he signaling, dude?
I don't think that
Just
he was
God, dude.
signaling.
It's just
Yeah,
God.
so in this podcast I did with this dude Andres, we were talking about these 8 different models of art, and number 2 was the signaling model, which he called cool kid theory. The next level up is hipster theoretic art, which he describes the cool kid as one standard deviation above the norm in terms of like sort of aesthetic narrowness, and then the hipster
Standard
is,
deviation.
dude, this is how we talk, man.
This
So
is the
the
most unaesthetic shit. I'm sorry. Okay, no, keep going and shit.
hipster theory, basically it's like 2 to 3 standard deviations above the mean for aesthetic narrowness or like assertiveness. But the one of the models after that he was getting at was like attempts at the sacred, and I feel like that's what Trane is all about. It's just like all the technical shit that goes into it is to serve a purpose of ascending, and it seems like there's like a genuine desire for something greater than himself, and that's why I feel like people worship him these days, because he was so fucking like there was something so sacred obviously about what he was doing.
So when you say going something beyond himself, that would mean that he's not signaling anything. He's just doing something for its own sake. I mean, is
I
that
guess so, yeah.
because
I mean, I think
signaling? Yeah, no, sorry, go
it
ahead.
was like some sort of like spiritual, path, I thought. So I don't know who it would be signaling to, other than to, like, God or whatever.
Because signal. I mean, to me, signaling means to me that it implies like instrumentality or instrumental. Like, I don't know the word. Like you're doing something not for its own sake. You're doing something for the purpose of it achieving something else, right? I mean, you're like signaling. If I'm trying to signal fitness, like if I'm playing sick riffs in order to signal fitness, then it's not about the riffs. It's about what I can get by people seeing me as fit or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it's about attracting a mate or achieving status. It's not for its own sake. Signaling always is about power. I mean, it's about gaining power
Mm-hmm.
through instrumentally, like just something, something in order to get something else. So that's why I don't. What is this model that you just said? I don't fully get it because he's saying, but
The attempt at the sacred. Yeah, I mean, I
like,
guess he's defining some sort of God that you're striving for, and the God can be whatever you want. And I'm not sure what Coltrane's God was, but I mean, I feel like in doing that sheets of sound shit, like it's like kind of like almost like an altered state where you're like, if you look at like some like Sufi shit of like dancing around until you're dizzy and you get into this altered state, maybe that's something more akin to what he was doing.
yeah,
Because it doesn't, I mean, it seems in the purpose of some sort of magical thing, like,
yes,
maybe with a K or whatever, but
oh yeah, it's got to be,
yeah.
it has to be. So there's like cool kid, there's cool kid art, hipster art, and then just John Coltrane. I mean, is that what this guy's? I'm gonna listen to
Well,
that podcast. This guy sounds like not deep, by the way. This
I know
this guy with the,
he's deep, but I mean, I guess like basically the cool kid theory is where he gets into fascism basically, and then hipster theory is kind of more like Zadig records or something like that. Like it's the fringe. It's the mini max strategy of like, I'm gonna put all my eggs in this fucking nutso basket and do some new shit that's totally novel. And I don't think that that's necessarily signaling. That's like more just like trying to make some progress, maybe like in progress. Uh,
oh,
uh, but I forget the exact order of these models, but the sacred was maybe like 4 or 5 or something like that.
but what is it also, dude? Standard deviation. I mean, that's a term from IQ testing, right? Or psychometrics, or no,
Just
or just
statistics.
statistics in general. But
Mm-hmm.
so how do you put this in? So how does this model into like statistical?
Dude, this is just my people.
But I mean, what is that like? But you're
We're
not
all
talking about
card carrying
stats.
Bayesians.
But
So.
you're talking about vibes, like vibes here and shit. As far as, I mean, you're talking about qualitative things, not quantitative. So how what does he mean deviations above and below? It's like,
I mean, I guess to these sort of like transhumanist rationalist people, everything is kind of like a probability distribution. So,
right.
yeah, I roll.
I guess. I mean, it's
Well, I mean, like, okay, like taking Zadig versus like, just somebody that's into whatever is cool now. Like the Zadig person is going to be so much less, like they're going to be so much rarer of a type of person
okay.
in terms of like their aesthetic preferences.
Okay. Okay. So you're talking about the number of the statistical distribution of
Mm-hmm.
ways that people engage music or
Yeah, so if you
art.
have like normie at the center of the bell curve, maybe then
Right.
like the cool kid, and then very few
Okay.
hipsters.
Okay. Yeah. No. I
And
could
those are
see
your
where you.
Zorns.
Right. Okay. So really, you don't think you wouldn't put Zorn in sacred? You'd put him in hipster, huh? It's okay.
The hipster's a wrong word for it, just because it has all these connotations, and like, the hipster's generally pejorative. But I mean, I think that I could see him as being sacred as well. But I mean, John Coltrane just reeks of sacredness.
Is the ultimate. Yeah. No, for sure. And this is, does this mean what people are achieving, or kind of just more the orientation of what they're going for?
I guess it's just like the artistic model of what they're up to.
Of what they're, I see. Yeah. Well, yeah,
It's like
that's about right. I mean,
like
yeah.
another example that he got into of a model is like exploration of state space. And so that's kind of like, I guess, if you're trying to explore every single rhythmic variation or every single sort of like temperament quality, and this guy's really into like qualia, as they talk about it, in terms of like consciousness, philosophy of mind stuff.
I'm
And
interested. I
so
don't know shit about that. I find that interesting. Yeah.
um out of curiosity, do you believe in free will?
I don't even, I don't talk that way, man. I don't really talk about believing in,
For sure.
like I actually don't even really, yeah. And I don't mean that as a, I don't mean that to be shitty. Like, I don't, but I actually, just the idea of like, do you believe in or not believe in? It's like,
Hmm.
to me, even saying I believe in something is kind of just this poetic way of like whipping up some kind of vibe and shit. You know what I mean? If you had said, "Do you believe in God?" I would say, "Yeah, actually, that would be a
Oh,
thing that I
interesting.
would be like, yeah, I believe in God." But it's like, if you were like explain that, I'd be like, I don't really, feel like that.
Yeah, it's a
But
poetic way to reduce something that's too big to describe.
yeah, or different people want to talk about. But I would never be like, I don't believe in free will, or I do. That's just not a word that I would start messing with in order to
Mhm.
put out a vibe or
Well,
whatever. But sorry,
I,
what were you going to say about quality? I'm sorry, I think I derailed you a little bit. Or
no, it's
no?
all good. I went on a sort of John sequitur of bringing up free will, just because it's like I wanted to get out how like these types of people have these outlandish views that seem kind of provocative, like not believing in free will, or like believing that consciousness is an illusion. Like that's a fairly common perspective to take in this world. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, but the qualia is basically just like the qualitative experience of like, what is it to experience red? What is it to experience, this or that? And how do you explain that in terms of, something that's like scientific or neuroscientific?
Word. Yeah. I don't know. Uh, yeah. I don't know about free will exactly. No, no. I like
Like
the
I'm
idea.
quickly turning this into like a college dorm room stoner
Yeah.
conversation. So for
Yeah,
that, I
I know. It's
apologize.
like, I don't know, man. I forgot what the fuck I was gonna say. I'll tell you what I do. If we're gonna talk philosophy stuff about what we were just talking about, I'm into, if we're talking about the sacred, I'm into Bataille's idea of the sacred. So that to me is like stuff so that's why for me the economic, that statistical thing of like that bell curve of like, oh, like people are going for the sacred or like on this tail end of like a distribution, like it's sort of like more and more rare, more and more rare. I don't know if I see the idea of the sacred as being like th- that thing where it's just like the rarest form of what other people are, or sort of like this. It's like I'm the Bataille. Have you read much Bataille or gotten into
No,
it? Because
no.
it's like with him, it's just like the sacred is this other. It's a thing that is sort of outside of the sort of homogeneous like economics of how things work, not literally financial economics necessarily, but just the
Mhm.
economy of like ideas and systems. There's this way that things work functionally, like uh they calls this homogeneous, it would be like capitalism or fascism or just anything that's like where everything's accounted for in like a system. And then the sacred is like that sovereign thing that is outside that, but that sort of guarantees the existence of everything else in a sense. It's like the outside. It's sort of like with what Land talks about with like the outside. It's like this sort of excessive realm of excess that's like not part of um it's not part of the regular world of exchange or something. So I to me it's like Yeah, I don't know if, I mean, there are people that are more interested or like overtly trying to like interface with that or whatever. But I mean, I think like the sacred, there's always ways in which it's affecting you or like being dealt with
Hmm.
just as an just as an outside or a limit, you know. Um, it's like with ritual and like breaking taboos and stuff like that. You're like accessing the sacred because you're doing something that's taboo for the rest of the year. But then once a year, you like chop a kid's head off or something, and that's the sacred because, you know, in order to ensure that you don't do that the rest of the year, you do that once in order to, you
Hmm.
know, it's like breaking the taboo so that you can have the taboo the rest of the year, some shit like that. You know what I mean? Um, so I don't know, like I feel like on some level, all like musical ritual gatherings all kind of have that vibe of the sacred because you're like framing
Yeah.
this thing that is like outside of, you know, it's like mass or something, you know, it's like Latin mass. It's like this is framed, this exists above time, it exists above economy, it exists above like uh regular systems of possibility, you know. Um, but it by definition can't be all the time, you know.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, I think you can have that with hipster shit or with just like normie shit. I think. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like might have done a bad job of explaining the sacred as being related to the other two. It's not necessarily, I'm not saying it's like a gradual step thing of like going toward the sacred from cool kid to hipster to sacred or anything. It's just a separate model of his in the eight models. But this conversation made me think about something I talked about with Ben Monder, which is he was talking about 3 attempts in his life where he tried to practice for 24 hours. And I decided I'm going to try to do this just because it's absurd. And so I feel like I'll maybe live stream a 24-hour guitar practice session. He says that he failed
That's
every
a
single
great idea,
time.
man. That's a great idea. So like diapers or what's the vibe?
I'll let myself like get up and take a shit. You know. I also, I mean, I'm like
Dude.
a weirdo, so like I'll be drinking my liquid meal and you
So
know.
so when you say that you're going to break your 24-hour practice session to go take a shit, you're basically saying you have less discipline than a gamer is what you're telling me. Dude,
Sure.
diapers,
How you
dude.
want to interpret?
Diapers or I'm not tuning in. No, because you know that shit. Because you know these cats are fucking wear diapers to fucking play games, right? I mean, that's like,
But they're just signaling their dedication.
I don't. Maybe they are. I hope they are, John. I fucking hope they are because if they're actually, yeah, if that's not signaling and that's just reality, then that's grim. Um, no, but they really do diapers, man. I mean, that's a thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I know this, but I like to try to not know it as often.
To not think about it, but yeah, no, yeah. Shed with the diapers, man.
I mean, I was thinking about like, should I do it as a fast? Like, I can go a day without eating. Like, I might as well
Yeah.
combine the 24-hour guitar thing with a 24-hour fast or whatever. But I don't know. I can also just be mature and take 5-minute breaks twice or something like
Well,
that.
you could have Cliff Bars and just be working
Hammer on some
on
poles.
like hammer-ons and shit on the side. I mean, or you know, yeah, like you could still totally be eating and like still checking out the patterns that you're gonna work on next. You know,
Hmm. I
I
mean, if
don't
I
know.
get to this, I'll do some like meticulous shit. Like Ben Monder was saying, he by the end of it, he was just trying to play quarter notes at 3 beats per minute, which is so fucking Mondarian. But I feel like
Quarter
I'll do
notes at
something.
3 minutes. That's sick, dude.
Yeah, dude. That cat is sacred. Like Ben Monder is, the John Coltrane of my life, I guess. So
I'm it's actually weird to admit how little of his stuff I've checked out because like anytime I check it out, I'm just like, this is just harmonically like the most galaxy brain shit like I've ever heard. But then I somehow just like never follow up on checking him out. I checked out like years ago the duo with him and Theo Bleckman.
mhm.
I mean, I know that's like sort of like probably level one, you know, for checking his shit out, but it was awesome.
Do you dig Theo Buckman as a singer?
Yeah, I do actually. Although I've only heard him in that. I don't even really know his stuff, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Word. What other singers are you into in that sort of vein?
I don't know about in that vein. I mean, I don't listen to a lot of singers that are really like experimental music type singers. You know, I mostly listen to like just like rock and pop singers, you know, mostly. I mean, and the early music stuff, you know, as well. Um, you know, I'm into Depeche Mode, man. You know, Dave Gahan. You know, I'm into you know, really into Morrissey. You know, I like those British kind of singers. I don't know. There's vocalists that I take no influence from, but a lot of inspiration from. Like you just wouldn't hear it at all in my stuff, but it's like just huge for me. David Tibet, you know, like he's just like my favorite. You fuck with Current 93 at all? Or you?
Oh, a little. I'm more of a Coil guy.
Yeah, Coil are amazing, yes. But yeah, as far as I don't know, he's just one of the greatest vocalists ever. I mean, it's just like this makes no it's utterly unapparent in my own singing that he would be a hero of mine, but like it's huge inspiration. But yeah, for my own shit, yeah. I mean, just yeah, Morrissey, Dave Gahan, and fucking medieval music, man. You know, really
Word.
is the vocal styles.
Now, you mentioned Current 93. Is there any esoterica in your life or like any sort of like occult stuff that you get into?
Somewhat. I mean, I was really not currently so much, but I was it's not a life path for me. I'm not like an esotericist or a magic practicer really in general, but I for a while, like when I was like, I believe in that though. I
Hmm.
mean, that's a very broad thing to say, but I am, that shit is real. But yeah, so like around like 28 to 31 roughly, which is Saturn returns. I mean, that's like a real thing. Like yeah, I was like going really deep into reading Gnostic stuff, the Corpus Hermeticum and just Paracelsus, however you say that. Um, Definitely reading a bunch about alchemy, read a ton about of Jung stuff on alchemy and astrology and stuff, and his sort of um, eschatological, the sort of eschatological Christian stuff with the Antichrist, and getting really into Current 93 around that time. So yeah, I mean, I'm into it, man. You know, I'm into I'm into alchemy. I mean, I'm into it along the lines of Jung. I'm into alchemy as proto psychoanalysis, pretty much, or proto like psychotherapy. You know, um, and there is a way that I kind of regard, I guess, composition as alchemy, sort of, but I don't want to like get too free with saying shit like that because it just
Hmm.
becomes this like facile, like it's like magic, man, and everyone's gotta like be like, ooh, it's like you know, it's like I don't want to like disrespect the history of magic by just saying that what I do is magic just to make it like as sick as that or whatever. But
Hmm.
there's this thing of like I'm into Deleuze and some of these thinkers on an occult level in the sense that they're dealing with its philosophies of immanence and non-dual uh, non-dual thinking, non-dialectical thinking, and ways of looking at the matter as a self-organizing uh, process, like looking at the spirit in matter, and that kind of I see magic and like alchemy and stuff like that as sort of, I see Deleuze and thinkers like that as kind of, in Land to an extent, I guess, as coming out of that or kind of trying to recapture that. Is that, you on board with that? That
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, philosophies of immanence basically is what people would say, you know. um and the more I read Kant, it took me a while to, I'm like just now really starting to get my hands around Kant enough that I can actually even say anything about him, but I'm starting to see how he is in that lineage too. I didn't get that, but you know, I was into Deleuze, I was into Land, into Deleuze, into Bergson, and that like there's a sort of this vitalism that I can sort of see that, and Nietzsche in a way more poetic, like weird way. um but I didn't really get how Kant does that because it seemed so analytical. I'm like, Jesus, I'm like actually like doing normal thinking here. This is a fucking drag. But now I'm like, but then I'm like actually kind of getting it. I'm like, okay, critique of pure reason. Like, yeah, so there's a vibe of immanence, self-organizing, spirit and matter. Duns Scotus is on that vibe, who I haven't read a ton of, but have you checked out Duns Scotus at all?
No, no.
Tegan had a really cool little video she made about Duns Scotus, and Justin Murphy did one too that was cool for sure.
Pretty cool.
Yeah,
I'll have to check those out.
Yeah, check out his thing on Duns Scotus. But yeah, so yeah, I like on some level, music, I guess, to me is sort of magic in the sense that it deals with what's imminent. It feels like a magic with a K type alchemical thing, in that I feel like I'm getting into materials as matter. It's arguable whether a fucking melody is matter, but I experience it as like, oh, I've got stuff and I'm like teasing out and like facilitating the self-organization of materials that are organizing themselves at its best.
Mm-hmm.
At its best, writing melodies can be like that. Lyrics, like if I have text, I write lyrics first, and then I'm like setting the text to melodies in its most unforced, most uncontrived moments. You know, it does feel somewhat like they're organizing themselves in a way where it's like you're dealing with like alchemical transformation and like lead to gold kind of like you're just sort of like bringing quicksilver into the equation, and kind of I fuck with Hermes, man. I do. I I fuck with him, man. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm into that stuff. Yes, I admit it. Yes.
Cool.
I said no, and then I just went on like fucking 20 minutes of how into it I am. Yeah.
Well, beautiful. Well, we're at an hour and a half here, and I want to respect your time. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we sign off?
No, man, I'm good. I mean, if you wanted to keep going, I would keep going, but sometimes there's just a natural, cadence, as it were. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we wrap up here? And if you want to come back on sometime, I'd love to have you back.
Yeah, man, just great questions, man. Really, really good. So yeah, let's sometime, let's do it again. It'd be very cool. I like, it's great too, because you just like, you're into the philosophy stuff and the music stuff is sort of equally as heavily, and I've been kind of like with my own show, my own channel, that's really been what I've been about doing, it's very recently. And I'm just kind of like, man, like how many people are like equally esoterically weird on like both of those fronts, it's like,
mm-hmm.
There's cats, it's like, it's a thing. So yeah.
And I got to credit you with sort of like getting me back into this, because like I was familiar with you from Extra Life and stuff back in the day, and then I heard you on Justin's podcast, and I was like, oh yeah, shit, like you can be a musician and like care about intellectual shit as well. And yeah. So it's like, oh yeah, what am I thinking? I should do both. Like, so.
Absolutely, man, absolutely. Yeah, it's philosophy right now too. It's a very I think it's in such a cool place, man, because I was always like Z's, like with Z's Deleuze was like our like book club book that like everyone, it was almost like required reading to just like read 1,000 Plateaus. And I didn't understand shit because I hadn't even read all the stuff that it's building on, and I hadn't read the stuff that it's rejecting and trying to go beyond, but it just, over the years, you keep marinating in it. But it was like, I didn't have that many people to fucking talk with, you know what I mean? Plus it was like early internet time, so it's like early 2000s. So it's like, now there are all these young people, man, like, younger than us, like just straight up kids who are like, they're like not in academia. They're not trying to be professional academics, but they like really give a shit about this stuff and are like really checking it out and are like on YouTube just talking about this shit. It's like sick, dude. I love that culture, man. It's really like,
absolutely.
People want meaning, dude, in a world where none is given. Well, because it's like these institutions, man, nobody believes in shit anymore. As well, they should not, It's just like, people aren't getting their meaning from the New York Times because it's lies. People aren't getting, NBC, fucking MSNBC, Fox, whatever. It's like, that's not happening. College, no one believes in that shit anymore, especially the humanities.
Oh yeah.
So it's just, yeah, like, you know what I mean? I mean, science, yeah, you can learn how to do science because that's still science. But as far as like humanities and social, I mean, it's just like, it's so like cucked, for lack of a better word. There's so many better words, but I just wanted to say that. But yeah, like, so, yeah, that's why kids are into philosophy now, man. People are turning to it because people want to, and it's happening in a DIY way. I fucking love it, man.
Word. Well, next time we talk, I'll have sent you some of my transhumanist manifesto type shit, and we can go on that. And you can criticize it all you want.
Please do. No, please do. I'll tell you though, man. I keep Yeah, man, I don't want to be too much on his nuts, but I've just been like really checking him out lately. That guy Reza Negarestani. Check out his shit, man. This essay, "The Labor of the Inhuman."
Mhm.
Um, he's a guy. I don't really know his shit that well, but he's a guy who I think is like getting into. He's totally part of that whole scene of like Nick Land and people who are about the, like, you know, he's like totally up to date with the like anti-humanist, transhumanist kind of thing. But
Mhm.
his concept of what humanism has been is like this very weird, forward-looking galaxy brain type uh commitment to updating the idea of the human along the keeping it updated with everything that's going on, which might seem to be anti-human. I don't know. There's like,
Mhm.
but of course you're saying transhuman. You're not saying anti-human.
Oh yeah,
So
no. I mean, like, I'm more of the sort of David Pierce school. I don't know if you know David Pierce.
nah.
He's a fucking lifelong vegan, and he's all about just kind of like trying to engineer out suffering, stuff like that. It's kind of like veganism on steroids. All this stuff about like, you know, valence and like how to basically have neurological states of well-being, and I mean basically that equates to like, you know, pharmacology. But uh, yeah, I'll send you some shit and I'll see what you think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if stuff is real, it has to be dealt with. I mean, this is why I'm into just like some of this edgy internet shit. Like some of it's dumb, but a lot of it is opening your mind to stuff that people don't want to think about, like what you're talking about with like just like like, you know, yeah, just admitting to the extent to which things are chemical or biological and stuff that feels inconvenient or weird. I'm
Mhm.
very on board with moving forward based on just, yeah, hardcore scientific shit that I don't have so much of a head for that, which maybe means I should go deeper on it, you know.
Word.
So yeah, so send me some of that, man, for sure. Yeah.
Will
Qualia,
do.
dude. Yeah. That sounds like a
Awesome.
medieval fucking notation or something, right? Like a qualia. I don't know. It sounds like some fucking like,
Like a half quaver or whatever.
yeah, some shit
Quaver
like
qualia.
a quilisma, some shit. Anyway, word, dude. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much
Yeah,
for joining me. It's cool talking to you, dude.
yeah.
Uh,
Likewise. I'll catch you. I won't see you at your fucking job. I'll have to see you at the internet because you're. Or no, are you still? No, the place is still open, right? Go get him, Tiger.
well, yeah, so I do like quality control for them. So I was only at that cafe like every week, like for a few hours. But
Oh, word.
yeah, I'm just at home in quarantine until
Yeah.
shit gets a little bit more normal. So
Rough. Yeah, man. Cool. Well, then I'll just catch you online, man.
beautiful.
All
I'll
right.
see you in the future.
Peace.